My name is Jacalin. You can call me Jack. And of course, I would love to connect with all of you guys on LinkedIn as well. It's like my favorite social channel, sad but true. I've been a designer for maybe 15 years. So my journey started as graphic designer, and then I went to become a branding designer, then become a brand strategist. And I did a whole lot of media design stuff. Then about 9 years ago, when probably, oh my God, time is so fast. It's probably 10 years ago now. Second iPhone generation came out. That's when every single company basically is like, okay, we wanted to make an app for every single one of our clients. And that was also sort of the route that I sort of lean into. And from then, it's just I've watched design evolved over the years, and I'm just so happy that so grateful too that I've chosen the right profession for myself, and I'm sticking around, still has the same passion as before. Whereas now I'm focusing. I'm a principal product lead at a government now. This is my first ever. So I've done B2C, B2B, and this year I started to go, you know what, I might just have a step at government role and see what happens. So I'm now at this place called Service New South Wales, and it's actually really interesting, and I am just having so much fun. And also it's just incredible to working with people that is there for the purpose of making other people's life better in general. Like no one's really fighting over anybody for like promotion and stuff. So it was quite refreshing. So I'm leading a team and sort of building products and just making sure that design operations it's at scalable level as well. And so that is me. On the side, I also do a lot of mentoring. That is something that I'm really passionate about. Passionate about helping designers not only, improve their portfolios, improve their soft skills, which I believe it's actually 50-50. You can't be a good designer without being able to speak business language, without being able to do storytelling. All of that stuff comes with it. So that is my passion. So I'm just so glad to tune in and meet you guys and look forward to all of your questions.
So I was just wondering, before we dive into some of the questions from the community, maybe we were going to explore the topic of the value of design. When did you make the choice to go into design? You said you explored a lot of these things around brand strategy, guessing a bit of marketing in there. Like, why did you choose to make the jump?
Yeah, so, you know what, first of all, I believe I have ADHD. And that is maybe why, because I'm always curious about every single area and how they all connect together. And as long as any area has the word design in it, I'm just curious about how that fits into the puzzle. So, and I personally think when I was in my 20s, jumping around allows me to dip my foot into that particular industry, understand how design fits into the puzzle, because I was that designer back in the day thinking design everything is so important, why don't you guys understand, right? But only until I moved into a marketing role, I was art director there. I then started to see how the role of design is completely different from an agency that I used to work with, or from a actually in-house designer model that I was working with. And it was really interesting. I was never seeing design the same. However, the massive shift was actually 7 years ago. I quit my job at the time because I was like, I just didn't like the fact that I'm just doing outputs most of the time, right? It's just like delivering outputs. And at the time I was like, yeah, the hands-on skills, I'm super comfortable. But what I really wanted to try out is maybe start running a business on my own and see what happens. So I quit my job and I started to I started a fashion label. So I started to design clothing and started to run, basically I was the production person, I was the salesperson, I was the website designer, brand designer, copywriter, you name it. I was changing hats all day, every day. And I think that experience completely changed the way how I tell stories about design. And after that, after 1 year of doing that, I was like, okay, cool, this is different. Like I never designed the same way ever again. So I jumped back into doing the design role. And ever since then, I realized the way I'm prioritizing things is very different. The way I am thinking is very different. I'm leaning towards the business side of things rather than just output focus. And I think that it's become a superpower in terms of like communicating with stakeholders and also working with just different teams as well. So that is definitely the changing. So I actually quite glad that I had to dip my toe in all of these different areas, because I think every single piece of the pie that I've tried, it became my little superpower machine that now I've put together. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of developed, you've dipped your toe in all these areas, and it's really given you a much stronger basis, maybe over if only you just stayed in design when working throughout, I guess, businesses and products. When you and I were chatting about potential topics, we talked about the value of design. Why is that one of, I guess, your major areas? What have you seen? I guess you've been around product design long enough. Is there issues? I know I've seen a lot of issues designers have when talking about the value of design. You've got some designers who are really full-blown evangelists for everything design. If you're not doing perfect design, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
What is, I guess, the value of design from your perspective, given your kind of your history that you've been in?
It's an interesting topic. I think it covers a lot, but right now, and I think my answer sort of changes over time as well. But at this very moment, I think design is not everything. So we need to stop thinking that we're so privileged, that we're a designer, that we are the center of user, whatever. I think that's not true. That's controversial. Hear me out. Because which designers have you worked with actually talk to our user every single day? I'm talking maybe 20%, at least 50% of our time is actually talking to users. If I'm looking around the room, even if I just talk to 100 designers, I bet no one hands up, because they don't talk to the designer. They don't talk to the users every single day. Yes, we hear some sort of user inputs, and then we sort of turn it into our prototypes and all of that. But the people in the business actually talk to users every single day. Guess who they are? Customer service people, sales people, right? So we can't just sit there and go, guys, we are a user-centered team. We are doing everything user. We're listening to user. But I'm like, but you don't. Have you ever, why don't you go and chat to your salespeople and make relationships over there? Why don't you go and have a conversation with your customer service every single day? And I think the power of design is connecting the dots. And I think every single company is eager to find those kind of designers who knows what the dots are in order to connect them, because the powers to design, the cross team, it's so underrated. Yeah, and it requires a special kind of people to being able to see it from the holistic level.
So what's required then if you're a designer who maybe they're entering the field to become that kind of person that can connect the dots? And I feel like you've sneakily touched on it already. What do you need to know or what do you need to work on in order to become that kind of person?
Yeah, I think the first thing, it's all mindset. It's got to be like, you've got to have the space for curiosity, and the space to just kickstart the conversation, even though it feels uncomfortable. And those two things is essential in order to just tap into any other roles that you work with. Even if the manager, I don't know what everyone's levels are, but like, for example, junior people, they tend to follow the leads from their principal designers or lead designers. And if the lead designers does not create that opportunity for them to connect with different teams, are they going to jump out and go, hey, maybe I'm going to, next time you're going to have a meeting with the sales guy, can you make an introduction or something? Or just introduce yourself on Slack. Hey, I'm working in X team and, I would love to, have a chat with you, or just make an introduction and start to make relationship like that in a company that you're working with.
The amount of indirect, and maybe indirect's not the right word because it kind of is direct, insights into users that I've encountered personally just by going and talking to the call center or by talking to people who handle particular kinds of applications. They've been in there for what, 10, 15 years. They've seen everything that could potentially happen. They know what the top common user problems on something might be. If I ask them to rattle off the most common kinds of people, they would be able to almost put together a persona faster than I can, I guess.
Oh,
yeah. So I really like what you said about that. So there's, I think, a lot to be gained from. You don't always need to go and do user research in the way that we think user research is. I think there's a lot of other methods you can go, especially, and I'm curious your experience, but I won't dive too much into government because I've been in government the past 4 years as a designer, so I'm sure we've got a lot to talk about. Also, congratulations on your role in Service New South Wales. They are apparently one of the best design areas in government. They have amazing investments in design recently, so I just want to add that. We've got a question from Lakshi. Lakshi, did you want to come off mic and ask Jacalin?
Yeah.
Sure. So my question for you, Jacalin, it's about how do you measure your success of design, and which metrics are important to tell the story to of your success and failures, of course, to your team and your stakeholders.
Okay, so there are two questions in there. I'm going to answer the first one first, and then we'll get the next one, because there are two different purposes for success metrics. The first success metric, you mentioned my success of design. So as a designer, how do I measure my own success? So is that, am I interpreting this correctly?
Yes. Yeah. What do you find your design is, let's say, good or a success, and how do you define what is bad?
Yeah. Okay. I think there is, the first thing I would always do when I get into any company, I spend the first couple of months just, vibing out the connections and vibing out networking in the company. Then the second thing I'm going to do, just figuring out exactly what's the biggest value that we can add in the individual team. So my team will figuring out to making sure that we have the vision, value, proposition all clearly defined. Without that, there is no design happening. And then the second thing that I'm doing is going to talk to all of the engineers and also product managers. I want to figure out exactly what kind of metrics are we measuring, what kind of tools that we have, whether it's Google Analytics, whether it's Tableau, Full Story, Amplitude, all of that. I want to see every single product that they have implemented into the success measure. Until I can get success measure, I'm not doing any design. So if someone comes to me with a brief going, oh, we need to add this landing page, I'm not doing it until we can see some sort of metrics that they're telling me why is this landing page design is important, how is that connecting to the business success metric, and how does that fit into the roadmap, and how is that going to benefit our users. And they can't just talk to me with, oh, the team thinks like this. I'm like, cool, what kind of map data do we have existingly? What are you observing? Why do you think this is important? So I would ask so much question. And if they have all the questions for me, that's great news. That means you're actually in a design, like quite high maturity design team, I think. If they can answer those questions, then I would look at the existing data. So for example, I've got briefed to change a dashboard, for example, then I'll look at what's the existing dropout rate? What's the purpose of this dashboard? If the dashboard there is for people to get to find things quickly, then I would then work with my product manager to figure out exactly what metrics are we measuring. So on the top of my head, if you wanted to find things quickly, there are a couple of metrics. One, time to first click. Two, lostness, right? Lostness is quite a complicated calculating metrics, but by sophisticated product managers, they know how to get those things done. And also search, the time to search to answers. So these are the metrics that I'll look at, and I'll then conduct qualitative interview or survey or whatever right? Normally, I don't go to survey until I know exactly what I'm doing, because survey is actually a very advanced research method, and a lot of designers are misusing surveys to a point. So I don't use surveys until I absolutely know what I'm doing. So once I figure out before all of these metrics, these are qualitative, then it's giving me enough picture to measure. Then I will, do the whole design thinking thing. And then once I have a prototype, I then make a decision whether this prototype, am I going to do low-fi testing, or the different type of testing to ensure that all of these metrics that you're measuring at the beginning is your design is doing some sort of changing. So it goes through that design phases, and your new design is changing some of those metrics. So at the end, the purpose of all of this, and you sort of redo it again, right? You redesign, remeasure until the thing is shipped. The thing is shipped to the market. At this point, it's then working super close with your marketing team, or my engineers or my product managers, to measure exactly what the outcome that we're after for this particular delivery. So it could be, I've designed this dashboard and the retention has increased 15%. So our user is now spending 15% more time on the dashboard. That most likely means they're finding more net value on the dashboard than before, right? So, but that's not enough. You got to go and do some qualitative research again, an interview. Hey, like, how do you find a new dashboard redesign, or what kind of value is it going to give to you, all of that kind of thing. So you have qualitative and quantitative data at the beginning, and quantitative data at the end, so that you can tell a story together. Before I did this design, our user drop-off rate, retention rate on this dashboard was only about 7%. And churn rate maybe about 15%. Now we looked at all the Google Analytics data as well, and it looks like the drop-off happened here, or people has rage clicks, all of these places. Okay, so that's metric. Then you sort of tell the story that way. And that is how I measure my own success. I don't want to do any design until I have some sort of metrics. And even the company doesn't have tools in place, there is a way to get some sort of metrics, but we don't want to get too much into that. I can run a workshop about that, but yeah, but that's generally what's happening when I'm measuring success. I kind of feel like I've touched on your second question as well. Which metrics are important to tell a story of success, failure to your team and stakeholder? And I think there are so many, hundreds of metrics, right? So it really depending on the particular project that you're working on. I do have a framework where I have those design principles. So for example, my design principle is efficiency. And then for efficiency, it's like, let's say this is the design metric, the North Star efficiency. So how do you measure efficiency? Time, right, to complete task. Time, number of attempts to get to want to be. On the top of my head, but there's a lot of other things that you can measure efficiency. That is the kind of the metrics that I think about. Normally, you can also use the metrics from Google. So it's the happy metrics. That's quite a usual thing for normal product companies as well. But it really depending whether your company is a private sector, public sector. Now I'm in a public sector. Our metric is completely different. Yeah.
I feel that one, Jacalin.
Yeah.
Recently, we ended up finding some great metrics. One of the struggles we're having in design, at least where I'm working at the moment, which is CASA. So we control all the airspace in Australia, pretty much. Anything to do with drones and planes. Didn't know anything about planes until I joined. So now I know they at least have wings. So that's good. But one of the interesting, I guess, metrics that I kind of learned through this was, it didn't, for us, it didn't really matter exactly. The metrics mattered, but for us, one of the determinants in terms of what metrics we chose was who we needed to convince in order to show that I guess the design particularly was more powerful at that moment. So the metrics for one of our user-centered, one of our design improvements was way more powerful if we angled it from, say, our customer service lens than if we angled it from our IT infrastructure lens instead. Yeah, depending on how we translated that. And one of the big problems I think a lot of organizations have, we're kind of having, but it's not too hard, is where to bring metrics in when you're bringing in a new feature or a new service versus improving an existing feature or service. And metrics for each of those are very different, I'm finding, at least in my role. Do you have any just general insight into the differences between those two things?
Oh, yeah.
New product versus existing.
Yeah, so usually in the product team, we have retention team and the growth team. So that's where it sits at. And which is why maybe a medium-sized company, they would separate those two teams at least. Retention team is looking at improving existing customer experiences. But growth team is looking at growth numbers. So it's either user acquisition, business sales numbers, growth, and all of that, right? So I just think that retention, it's really hard to pinpoint one, the top metrics, but retention, it could be churn rate, right? Like the customer churned, how many has churned per year, that's retention. Time spent on your website per day, time spent in this particular feature, the number of times people launch this feature to use every week. All of this is retention. Yeah, like these are pretty typical ones, or like drop off rates. You know, these are
one
like
of my oh, sorry, Zoom has a little lag there. I'm gonna say one of my favorites is always just like how often are people calling up the call center? Like that's such a, I guess, basic metric that even just with that you can calculate into man hours, and then those man hours into dollar figures, and then dollar figures into infrastructure figures, and all those sorts of things are able to, all of a sudden you start getting real numbers fast. I might get some of these questions in because I think we're at about half an hour and I don't want to take you over. How do you feel about that, Jacalin? How are you on time?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Jan. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah. So we'll go to Dara's, and then I actually put up a Slido before this to gather some questions. We have some interesting ones. But Dara, do you want to ask yours?
Sure. Hey guys. So I've been listening. I promise. It's just, trying to save the planet by keeping my camera off. And there's my dog for you, Ben. I am a career pivoter. I have 20 years in marketing design, and I'm pivoting to product design later on in life. And I understand a lot about the metrics. My biggest challenge, as with a lot of career pivoters, is that as we're building our portfolios, since most of them are prototypes that we've tested or not, depending on our circumstances, it's really hard to get metrics because we don't have something like Pendo that we can add to our phone app to actually help us measure it, or even Google Analytics when you're doing a website prototype. So what are your suggestions on how to gather some of those metrics? I've been doing a lot of qualitative interviewing. I work for Starbucks. I'm queen of the drive-through, and my two Starbucks projects actually have to deal with the drive-through. So qualitative isn't an issue. It's the quantitative. Once I have my prototypes built, I'm going to do some testing to see, some A/B testing to see if my idea is better than what is being currently deployed within the retail stores. So what would be some metrics that I could use for that project, but also just general design projects for all of us who are trying to break into UX with our Figma prototypes?
Great question. And you know what? I have so much empathy for what you're doing. I used to teach at General Assembly, so everyone always have this similar concern as you have.
It is. It's hard. Yeah, it really is.
And you can always work around it. There are ways to go around it. So question number one I always ask is this design I'm doing, is the target audience B2B or B2C? So it's obviously very easy, much easier to get insights if or quantitative data if we are B2C. So is your Starbucks project going to be B2C?
All of my projects are B2C. I have a consumer facing background. So
Right.
retail, e-commerce, things like that.
Yeah. So generally, whoever that has been through that drive-through experience or bought anything from Starbucks in general.
Mhm.
Yeah, great. Okay, so this makes things life so much easier. I was hoping that you didn't say B2B. I was like, B2B is a whole another. Okay.
Yeah, it's B2B. I've had experience with that in the past because I actually specialized in veterinarian marketing. So it can be very difficult trying to find that industry data.
Yes, it can take years, years
Mhm.
sometimes. But
And
anyway, so
expensive.
I'm glad that you're doing B2B. One of the favorite tool that I'm using is called, so sometimes we do moderate the interview, right? So you're looking at the face of the user, looking at how they interacted face to face. That's moderated. Sometimes it does make people feel uncomfortable or feel like they must do the right thing to make you happy. So there is a little bit of a human connection there that might be biased.
Okay.
So I usually would combine with another the method to research is called unmoderated user testing. So there are tools. Luckily, there's this amazing tool actually called maze.design. I'm sure some of you guys may have heard of it, but this is really a godsend of a tool that you can sync your Figma prototypes. You just need to make sure that you're clicking everything, making sure that you have the stories written out. So the user stories, for example, the task is please sign up for the account. But I would suggest that, there is no need to test sign up unless it's absolutely like a different flow, like every single sign up is the same. So let's just skip that. Maybe you go to the landing page and go, try to order a coffee and before you pick up or something, and then see how people interact with that prototype. And obviously your prototype is there is an ending point, right? So there's some success screen, and that success screen is when they complete the task tick. So Maze.design is incredible because you can sync it, and if you don't have user, you can actually pay for user, really affordable user. And knowing that your user group is actually quite a generic demographic, it's so easy. You can actually, I think it was like, you can have like $5 per user testing or something on Maze.design. And it's a small price to pay for some legitimate data that it's going to spit out. So you can test maybe 20 people or six, 7 people, whatever that you feel comfortable. What does Maze do is it measures exactly how many people drop off, how many people will rage click, and also a little funnel of if they are coming from here and they click through exactly your expected path, they may be gone through a different path. And then they also give you a heat map, and you can also do A/B testing. And we have all sorts of like actual proper user measuring tools. Another thing that I use is system usage scale.
I wasn't aware of Maze. I knew about User Brain and Userlytics because I'm actually a user analyst on the other end. So I test for people. So it's going to be kind of weird having people test for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know about Maze, so that's great.
Yeah. So there is another method that I usually use. This is called system usability scale. System, if you guys haven't heard about scale. System usability scale is a pretty common one that you could use as well. It's a 10 multiple choice question. And it's really important to stick with the question, but you just change the name of the product to the part that you're designing.
Okay.
Because the question is actually scientifically designed to test people's correct reactions without bias. And so I use the SAS method for just like a quick scale, even with moderated user testing with 5 to 6 people. And sometimes all you need is 5 to 6 people, which can also suggest about 82% of the demographic. So luckily you're designing something that's for Starbucks. Everybody drinks Starbucks. You can maybe quite easily find 5 or 6 people around you to run a quick testing and then run this score.
I think I could. I'm working on the digital tipping aspect of the phone app because it's having problems in the United States, as well as the point of sale system and the digital tipping that's added to that. So I'll be able to find some coworkers to help, but also some customers too.
So, okay, so we have a couple of methods. Number one, you can do qualitative interview or like just monitor testing. And number two, you can try Maze, have a small budget, $30 or something that can give you some really legitimate graph and data.
Oh, definitely.
And then you can also use the system usability scale for some sort of like different perspective. And this is almost like for every single design that we do at work anyway, we look at multiple different ways to justify our design. The last thing we want is to rush through it just like roughly and then deliver the design and then ended up being something that's just average, below average. So yeah, we use so many different methods at the same time. So I would encourage you to do that.
No, I think those are all great. I value your time. Thank you for answering my question.
Thanks, Sarah. Good luck.
So I've got about 2 questions, and then I actually want to ask you about your course, but let's get these questions through because I'm curious about why you launched like the whole Maven thing. I'm not just generally intrigued by that. But before that, you've spent some time in design. So I got 2 questions. One, I personally think that we're in the middle of a bit of an explosion of UX tools and resources and connectivity. You know, Figma's brought out by Adobe. You've got all these secondary tools popping up. You've got Maze, Dovetail, you know, GPT, everything galore, Notion, or no matter what it is. From where you began and where you are now, what's your, I guess, perspective on where the industry is maybe going or where it's shifting as a UXer?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that question coming. That is a tricky one. Where do I see the role is going? With all of I actually, you know, I'm so excited with all of this AI stuff. Because you gotta know. Yeah, you gotta know, sure, AI is probably gonna help us design screens. So your Figma skill probably is not gonna be as crucial, which is amazing because it helps a lot of people get things done faster. Right? But somebody still has to input those commands at the beginning. And that's where that strategic part comes in. That's where that human part, the AI wouldn't be able to tell you what to do, right? So you are going to be that connector between the product that you're doing with the output that you're delivering. And AI can help you with the output currently, but they can't help you to strategize what's valuable, what's quicker to market. And for a lot of companies, if you're not in the public sector, obviously time to market is the most valuable thing. If you can get things time to market and will be able to break it down into, you know, what's the most prioritized feature that we're going to ship is going to deliver the biggest value. And I think AI is still quite far from that. I'm personally super excited because if they can help me with all of the UI stuff, and they're going to be epic at design system, right? Because these are all precision related. They're going to be amazing at synthesizing user research, something that I suck. Personally, I'm a divergent person, and when it's convergent, I need help. So I can't wait for AI to help me to do that. And so, yeah, I think it's only going to help us to do our job better. So for designers, I would say training our thinking to be a bit more strategic is actually quite important because that is going to set yourself up for success. And you're going to be able, once you can start to think strategic, you become that connector between what business needs and what design can do to make that business stand out from the crowd and give that advantage, a competitive advantage that other company doesn't have. And that's where the value of design really lays. So AI, you know, I welcome it. I think it's going to be amazing for our industry.
I love that. And if you reminded me of I think it was I'm going to poorly quote it recently from a article I was reading that it's originally maybe 10 years ago, just being a designer or knowing about design was kind of enough to stand out. Whereas now it's becoming so integrated into the way we run companies, the way we design products, that to really, I guess, stand out or kind of be a great designer, you have to connect it with your business knowledge or your entire end-to-end product knowledge, and sometimes beyond, in order to to stand out in the field in those ways.
Yeah.
I think that's sorry, carry on.
Oh no, I was just like, There's a bit of lagging there.
So I'm going to ask about your course, and then we might, if you end up with time, there's a few more questions. There's always more questions. But so I guess I want to know two things. You started a YouTube channel on UX, and now you've also made a course. So I'm curious. Yeah, I've been watching your YouTube videos. Great work. But I want to know, like, why did you start those? Did they impact your career? And yeah, could you just walk us through kind of what's that journey been like from there?
Yeah. So as mentioned before, I probably have ADHD, so I just like to try a little bit of everything. And so sorry, I don't know why my camera keeps blurring me, so I have to turn it off and on. There we go. And so YouTube is just like a fun thing. And personally, I like to edit, like, so I like to use Premiere, or I like to use camera, and I like to, so it's a channel for me to practice public speaking as well. It's something that I'm quite sort of focusing on developing that skill. I believe if I could develop public speaking skills, it's going to improve my in-person presentation skills sometimes. And that's just the platform for me to practice that. Okay, this camera is really weird. Okay, there we go. And
I need to turn off background blur or something.
Channel, but guys, I've been so slack, and I realized that it takes so much time to put together a video, and I just sort of put it aside. But I should, once the course is finished, I'm going to get back to it again. And I think to me, the YouTube is more like a little diary that I'm going to put messages out there, and it's a form of just story noting, basically. So that's the YouTube channel. What's the second question again about the course?
So what's the course? Yeah, I saw you launch a course, something called Maven, which I honestly haven't dived in too much. I was wondering, could you tell us a bit about what's the course, what's the topic as well, and why that, given kind of the history you've talked to us about?
Okay, so I mean, I've been teaching at General Assembly since 2018. So from 2018 to 2021, I've been leading sort of UX course there, part-time course. I can't do full-time course. It's really difficult. And then what I realized is there is a disconnection between the content that these boot camps deliver to what actually is happening in the industry, right? And a lot of people argue that, well, for junior, if you want to get into the industry, you just need to be really good at hands-on skills, such as Figma, such as X, Y, Z, and those like cookie cutter, design thinking, double diamond, whatever. And I just think it's really unrealistic. And I think what's the bigger competitive edge that any junior designers can have, or like Dara transitioning from marketing, your superpower would be the knowledge that you gain from those marketing backgrounds, actually. And no one talks about this, how important those things are. What I think a lot of designers, from my observations throughout the years, the ones that would be able to come up as the better value to a company, it's always become the partner for the stakeholders. They are not designers, they're not the output drivers, they are the partner. So what that means is the stakeholders, your CEO is not going to learn to speak your design language. Forget about that. We should never ever expect people understand exactly where you're coming from and understand what you mean by saying accessibilities and all that stuff. They don't. We don't blame them. But who's going to make the change, right? So what we have here is designer going, design. And the stakeholder is like, okay, well, I have so much things to care about. You just need to get this to me. So that became that disconnection, right? Stakeholders are not going to change. They need to get money for the business so they can pay you. So if you keep focusing on design, it's just going to devalue you, actually. So what if we change the way how to talk to them and start understanding where they're coming from, their pain points are, how design is going to fit into that picture. So take your egos out about what kind of design you want to deliver, but what kind of design is going to drive the impact for the business, and start speaking those languages. And it's all about what question you're asking at the very beginning, right? What kind of question are you asking? You can ask, so what do you want to deliver? And they can tell you, oh, I just want a landing page. Or you can ask, what kind of a business value do you want to achieve this year? And I guarantee you, they're going to see you completely different. And there is many different frameworks that you can follow. And then it's about, again, curiosity about how other people complete their job, how you can help them complete their job. But just adding that a little bit of garnish of design on the top. And that will become, you will become the most valuable person in the company by being that connector.
Jacalin, you need to come talk to my professors about this. I've been telling them the same thing.
Yeah, let's have that. So I think this course is designed to help designers speak those languages and help designers facilitate proper workshops with your stakeholders. And there are frameworks that you can follow for them to go, this is going to be the most effective brainstorming session that we do together, and bring the stakeholders together through your journey. So they don't think this is just designer's job. They think you are actually helping me to achieve what I am going for. So they participate. And that is how you sort of start to change the maturity in the company by bit. It's by you.
Now I got to ask, what is your course? So what's the name?
So it's called, I'll just post a link. But I should totally, I'm not quite sure if the name is a little bit vague. So accelerate your product design career. So the curriculum is covering basically, number one, as I mentioned, majority of my talk here is all about business acumen and how to talk like a strategic designers. And then utilizing the proper research methods for the project that you're working on, or also just developing the feedback loop. This is a little bit challenging because sometimes you need money, but when there's a situation where there's no money, how do you utilize the minimum that you have? Actually similar to Dara situation where there's no proper tools, you can still use the low key methods. But what I think is really important is facilitation skills. Because good designers, they have to have good facilitation skills. You need to be able to measure time. You need to be able to measure human emotions and be able to bounce off the right nuggets at the right time, so you can, come up with the best. And finally, being able to measure their own success. This is interesting because we kind of like answer this question a little bit throughout today. But yeah, so hopefully I would like to deliver this in a very small cohort. I think 20 people, it's the maximum, because I wanted to make sure that everyone is getting that, almost like really in-person help. And it's just that really nice. Maven is the only online platform that all have the facility that everyone can work together. So it's an online course like this. We're working together. And there is a whole portal on Maven that it's integrated. Everything is integrated. It sends you calendar reminder. You don't have to have a different Slack channel, conversation, message. Everything is in it. And that's why I'm like, finally, I can run my own course. Because back then with Teachable, I'm like, no way. It's just too hard.
So I want to just maybe get a little meta on you. What's been the impact of teaching at GA, of setting up your own business, running your own fashion label, making YouTube videos, making this Maven course, doing all these things? What's been the impact on your career? Has it, I feel like it has, but has it opened up opportunities? How's it kind of helped you from those early days when you just started design up until maybe where you're at now?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps, to be honest. But to be honest, a lot of people might say the opposite. If they are suggesting people from the beginning of their career, maybe like the first couple of years, they would suggest you to focus on just doing product design, and then transition between different companies. But for me, because my background started 15 years ago, so it makes sense for me to jump through different hoops. And how I utilize all this knowledge that connected is now when I'm working at or if I have a client, for example, if they have in a retail business, right? Then, or e-commerce business, then I'll be able to utilize that retail and e-commerce knowledge that I picked up from running my own business. And if they come to me with a problem that people doesn't convert on their website, I'll be able to use my branding, design and branding strategy knowledge from back in the day. And to be honest, when I was doing branding or like business, a lot of them, I still utilize that similar process as designers do, that whole design thinking thing. You know, you explore a lot of options, and then you know, prototype, and you come down to consolidate the insights, all that kind of stuff. It's quite similar. But just because of all that background, I'll be able to pinpoint what's the biggest problem that we can focus on the more holistic level, and looking at brand across product and messaging across all of the different channels to making sure that everything's connected. Yeah, so I think I don't regret.
So I've got, I know we're reaching time, and I had one question I really wanted to ask, and I actually messaged Dara privately, just been like, hey, I'm thinking of asking this. What do you think? Because I wanted to get a sense check. And if it's an uncomfortable question, feel free to breeze right past it and we'll just go over to something else. I was wondering, what's it like, and some background here, I was actually going through a lot of our last replays of the guests we'd had on, and I noticed we had probably about 80% male and maybe like 10 to 20% female, which is something that kind of just stood out a lot for me. And I was wondering if you might have any thoughts on, I guess, women in design, or I guess general diversity in design, if there's maybe anything you might want to touch on there.
Thanks for noticing that. I mean, that's massive issue as well. But I'm usually an optimistic person, and I think where we are now is already a lot better than what was 10 years ago. So it is a good change that I'm seeing, and I swear to God, 10 years ago, if I was starting to speak out in a meeting room or something, I used to often get cut off, often get brushed through, a lot of those things, which actually is one of my motivation to start that fashion label, because it's designed from women who does not take bullshit. Yeah, so then now I think, yeah, it's a very different climate. A lot of companies are looking at that balance closely and working with their HR to really trying to change that. And so that's really good. Women does have, you know, I wouldn't say disadvantage, but it's about what kind of fight that we wanted to fight, right? Like, so I see the challenge of, I don't have kids, but for those who have kids and they have to go, you know, the maternity leave and then come back and trying to get back to the industry again, I just have so much respect. It's because it's like a superhuman. They have become a superhuman, and people don't understand how much brain power that requires to do both at the same time, you know? Yeah, so if anything, I think, you know, women went and had a baby and came back to the workforce again, it should be on their resume, because now they can multitask, they can think 5 steps ahead, they can do all of those things at the same time that other people wouldn't be able to do. So all of these are qualities to be able to manage a good team, and also qualities to become a more empathetic leader. So I think we should just, you know, we should embrace, like, I think instead of going, oh, this is not enough and stuff, my method is more like just embrace what's being done, what's being good. And then the more that we manifest on it, the better of that same thing is going to happen.
I want to open up just the floor, because I know we're pretty much on time, 1 hour. Does anyone have any questions or anything they would like to ask right now? I know we had one by, I believe, Sarah earlier. And Sarah, that's a can of worms that I would love to open, and I feel like we could talk about that one thing, which was, I think it was on. Do you want to ask it and see if we can get anything out of it in a short minute or two?
Yeah, sure. Jacalin, nice to meet you, and it was a lovely session, by the way. I think it was really impactful. Apologies for my looks, just ignore me. So here's the thing. How do you handle stakeholder management in a government environment? So right now, here's my situation. I've been consulting for a client for a year, and now I'm moving to a full-time position with them, and I'm becoming their first design hire at the same time. But the thing with the company is, as most companies are, they're still early stages. And although we have made some significant progress in terms of UX and product maturity, the business side of things are still not involved enough. So we cannot still talking about growing the team or adding some consultants. So how do you handle these kind of things with the business level stakeholders?
Yeah. Okay. So usually I've been through very low maturity before. So I usually ask a couple of questions. It's how much budget do they think that they're going to invest in the design team, and what's the stakeholders' perspective on this team growth first? So without asking the question, I will never know what their projection for the next 3 years or even 5 years. And if they can tell you some sort of roadmap points, then that's good. You can use it as a guideline. And then ask yourself, how can I help you to achieve those milestones? And then work with them, even in the low budget scenario. You can, trust me, you can still have a very mature process, even with a small team, right? And so, and to stakeholders, a lot of the time, as long as you're not spending a ton of money, they don't care what you do. They just want you to be able to do your job happily, right? So then it's now up to you how to build that process in a sustainable and scalable, but don't get burned out from doing it. You don't never need to make sure that your process is the same as always like massive company. So we just need to look at what's the essentials that you need to tick off the list. So for me, the first essential that I need to tick off the list is I need a feedback loop. So when I say feedback loop, it's either tools that we have implemented to measure success, like Lachin was asking earlier. So a lot of government, they don't use a lot of tools, but at least if you have GA4, Google Analytics, that's good. Okay, great. Do we have, second question always, how much budget do we have per month for user interviews? And if they don't have the budget, then I will help them to maybe put a number that they're comfortable together aside and trying to convince them why this budget is important for design. Yeah, as you know, $1 of design equals $5. $1 of planning equals $5. Design equals $10 at development stage. So it's kind of at the end of the day, still money talks. So if they can, if they go, okay, we have $600, you can spend $600 per month for user interview. Okay, great. That still means usually what I do, if we have fortnight sort of sprints, every fortnight, I then put 5 or 6 user interviews. And even if you pay $50 per person for that 5 or 6 user interview, bang, that your $600 is still very worth it. Yeah, and you can set up a recruiting process, right? So you have to think about there's different ways to recruit. You can recruit via social media sign up, or a website landing page, and working with a marketing team, because that's no money needed. They just need to put a landing page and then everyone shares to the channels. And the people comes in, you just need to think sophisticatedly, how do you filter out criteria every time when you're recruiting? Because sometimes you only want to interview people that are about 65 years old. Sometimes you only want to interview people in a rural area, for example. So every time this template probably give you a specific guideline that you have to go through. Okay, and then you then work through the payment system, and usually just have like $600. I just buy prepaid Visa card, and I have, you know, like 6 of them sitting there ready to go. And as soon as the user finishes the interview, you email that prepaid Visa card to them right away. So that, think about ways to reduce your admin work, and even better if your product manager can help you to help run this, right? So with these alone, if you have the metrics and if you have the user research loop happening, I would say that's pretty much the baseline for you to be able to do good design and a good momentum. And that's the very basic. The rest of it is all about education to them in a slow pace. Once in a while, every month, I'll do a show and tell every Friday on a Friday lunch. This is show and tell lunchtime. This is what we've done, and why is this important so that the stakeholder can tune into that. Sometimes when I do user interview, I also share them an invite so they can come to the user interview, but sit, no cameras, only interviews, only, you know, camera on for the interviewer. Rest of them is just listening. Yeah, so these is little things that you could do to slowly push them a little bit to understand the importance of design.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
One thing I want to add on that, sorry, is that when you start bringing in things like design into low maturity organizations, often they are amazed because I don't think they have ever experienced the clarity that can sometimes come from the concrete metrics where you're demonstrating these minute design changes, when you can almost directly draw a dollar figure from it that they themselves can see as well. I think you start developing really good champions that then kind of become part of your team and your flywheel for that eventual maturation of design. And one thing I think I'd like to add is, like, it's okay if they're low maturity. I've seen a lot of designers enter some low maturity organizations and get freaked out by it, and terrified and worried and really stressed. Like, what's that meme where they got to push a rock up a hill, a Greek myth somewhere. I think there's probably a better perspective to look at it. Maybe you're slowly supporting, coaching, and helping the organization gain clarity, connect more with the people they're trying to serve. I prefer that framing over, I need to make them design mature, which I think is a mindset a lot of people approach low maturity organizations with, especially if they haven't been in that before. Yeah.
True that. All right, I'll keep you posted.
Sisyphus, thank you, Lach. Awesome. Well, I think you know, we're definitely over time, so thank you for sticking around, Jacalin. Is there anything else you'd like to add for the crew?
Yeah, so lovely to chat to you guys. I really loved chatting with you, all great questions. And yeah, feel free to connect me on LinkedIn or chuck me a message on there. Always happy to chat.